Hello. My name is Luna. I never thought I'd be telling my story to strangers. But if you're listening, maybe it's because something in your life feels broken too. Maybe you've been forgotten, overlooked, or silenced. If so, I hope my story finds you exactly where you are. It started on my 61st birthday, in a small gray house on the edge of Burlington, Vermont. That morning, the sun broke through the lace curtains just right, casting soft gold over the kitchen table. I had set out 2 plates. One for me, one for my daughter Madison. I made her favorite cinnamon French toast with extra powdered sugar, just like when she was little. I even lit a candle. Silly as that sounds. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But I held on to hope. Madison hadn't been calling much in the past few months. Said work at the architecture firm was overwhelming. Said her husband Caleb had been dealing with a lot. She always said things vaguely like that. But I still believed she'd show. Birthdays were sacred in our family. Or so I thought. Noon passed. Then 1. Then 2. I must have checked my phone a dozen times. The screen stayed blank. So I did what mothers do when the heart begins to ache. I made excuses. Maybe traffic. Maybe a last-minute crisis. Maybe she was planning a surprise. At exactly 2:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. I stood so fast I nearly tripped over the kitchen rug. And there she was, Madison. My girl, wearing that sleek beige coat she always wore when she wanted to look professional but soft. She was holding a bouquet of gas station roses. Petals already starting to wilt. Happy birthday, Mom, she said, and leaned in for a hug. You came, I whispered, my voice catching. Of course, she said, brushing past me into the house. Go get your coat. We've got lunch reservations. I didn't ask questions. Just slipped on the red wool sweater she once gave me for Christmas. Grabbed my purse and followed her out like an obedient child. We didn't head toward downtown. Instead, we drove through back roads I'd never seen. The air grew quieter. The trees turned dense and unfamiliar. I started to fidget with the strap of my purse. Then, just ahead, I saw the sign Silver Pines Assisted Living Center. I blinked, thinking maybe this was a mistake. Madison parked the car. What is this? I asked, forcing a laugh. Mom, we need to talk, she said. Her voice clipped. She launched into a rehearsed speech about safety and memory lapses. About how she couldn't carry the burden alone anymore. About how she found a really nice place. Comfortable. Full of people your age. I sat frozen. Then she stepped out of the car. Popped the trunk. And there it was. My suitcase. Packed without my knowing. My privacy. My home. My life folded up into luggage like I was nothing but clutter to be put away. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, she said. I didn't cry. Not yet. Inside, everything smelled like disinfectant and boiled peas. The receptionist smiled too brightly. A nurse took my coat. A clipboard was handed over. Legal documents. Power of attorney. Signatures. Her name. My name. Done. They led me to a room with beige walls and a window that faced nothing but a brick wall. No candles. No cake. No music. No family. Just silence. That was how my 61st birthday ended. But trust me, this was only the beginning. The first night I barely slept. The bed was too firm. The sheets smelled like bleach. Somewhere down the hall, a television buzzed with late-night game shows. I laid there, staring at the ceiling. Still wearing my sweater. My shoes tucked neatly by the door like I was just visiting and would leave in the morning. But I knew better. They had taken my phone, said it was for my own good, said I had been confused lately. Madison told them I'd been forgetting things, mixing up stories. They looked at me with those sweet, pitying eyes. Honey, do you know what day it is, sweetheart? Can you tell me your daughter's name? I answered every question. Calmly. Clearly. I spoke with the voice I used in the classroom for 30 years. But no one really heard me. It's strange how quickly people stop seeing you once they've decided you're broken. My roommate, Eileen. I was kind enough, but nearly catatonic. She slept most of the day and talked in her dreams at night. She once called out a name Tommy and cried without waking up. I never asked who he was. Some memories are meant to stay untouched. The days blurred. Morning pills. Soft eggs. Activity room. Bingo. I wasn't allowed to go outside without someone signing me out. There was a courtyard with plastic chairs and artificial plants. They called it the garden. It smelled like mold. I kept trying to hold on to pieces of myself. I'd jot words into a tiny notebook I wasn't supposed to have. I recited poetry in my head. I asked for books. But they only had romance paperbacks and crossword puzzles. I read them anyway. What broke me wasn't the room or the schedule. It was the way everyone smiled too much. Like they were trying to convince themselves that we weren't all slowly being erased. Days passed. Maybe weeks. I lost track. Then one afternoon, during blood pressure checks, someone new came in. She was young, maybe early 20s, with warm eyes and a deep brown braid tucked under her cap. Her name tag read Sky. She pressed the cuff around my arm and looked me in the eye. You don't belong here, she said. I blinked. Don't get me wrong, she continued. Some people need help, and that's okay. But you're still sharp. You're not lost. Her words hit me harder than I expected. We talked. A little at first. I told her I was a teacher once. That I used to host poetry nights at the town library. That my daughter used to love the sound of rain on the window. Sky listened like no one else had since I arrived. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush. She listened with her whole face. That night, I sat by the window, watching the reflection of red tail lights drift across the parking lot. I thought about what Sky said. I wasn't lost, but I was trapped. The next day, Sky returned, slipped something into my palm when no one was looking. Found this in a book cart. Belonged to a resident who passed. No one claimed it, she whispered. It was a folded lottery ticket. Old and creased. What am I supposed to do with this? I asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled. Maybe it's time the universe owed you something. I almost laughed. But that night, after everyone went to bed, I snuck into the dusty corner of the lounge where an ancient desktop still sat. I typed in the numbers, one by one, hands trembling. And then I froze. $3.5 million. I checked again. Refreshed the page. Read every number twice. It wasn't joy that hit me. It was fear. What if Madison found out? What if she claimed I wasn't capable of managing money? What if she tried to take this too? I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it wasn't because of grief. It was because, for the first time in weeks, something inside me had sparked. I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. By morning, the spark had become a flame. I kept the printed confirmation of the lottery numbers folded tightly in the lining of my bra. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just money. It was a way out. A key. But escaping a place like Silver Pines isn't as simple as walking out the front door. They had my name. My legal documents. My history carefully edited by Madison. She'd already convinced them I was unstable. One wrong move, and I'd be labeled confused. Delusional. A danger to myself. I needed help. Real help. So I waited until the afternoon rounds and asked Sky if we could talk. Really talk. I pulled her into a quiet corner between the linen closet and the vending machines. And I told her everything. The ticket, the fear, the silence. Madison. She didn't flinch. Didn't ask if I was sure. She nodded, like she had already known something deeper was going on. I know someone. She said, a volunteer attorney. Comes in twice a month. Helps seniors with wills and end-of-life planning. His name's Jack Rosen. He's smart. And quiet. 3 days later, Jack arrived. He was in his 40s. Well-kept beard. Faded denim briefcase. He looked like someone who'd rather be hiking than talking about legal guardianship. That made me trust him more. We met in the break room under the hum of a flickering light. I slid him the folded lottery confirmation and whispered the words that felt like they belonged in a spy novel. Can you help me disappear? He didn't blink. Just looked down at the numbers. Then back at me. We'll need to move fast, he said. The next 48 hours blurred. We started with the basics. A new phone under a temporary name. A blind trust, so no one could trace the money directly to me. Jack drafted paperwork to dissolve Madison's power of attorney. It would take time to finalize. But he had strategies to protect me in the interim. Then came the new mailing address. A P.O. box in a nearby town. Then the ID. Then the burner bank account. Sky brought me plain clothes from a thrift store, clothes that didn't look like they belonged to anyone at Silver Pines. Just neutral. Forgettable. The night I left. It was raining. Not hard. Just a cold mist that clung to everything. Sky hugged me in the back hallway where deliveries came in. She didn't say goodbye. She just whispered, "Don't forget who you are when you get out there." I squeezed her hand. I won't. I slipped into the night, carrying nothing but a duffel bag with a few essentials. A folder of documents. And a heart that had spent too long in a cage. I took a Greyhound out of Albany under a false name. Saturday near the back. Hood up. Sunglasses on. Every stop made my pulse race. But I didn't look back. Jack had helped me buy a modest cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina. It wasn't glamorous. But it was mine. The trust paid in full. No mortgage. No links to Luna Harper. When I stepped into the tiny wooden house for the first time, the floorboards creaked under my feet like they were greeting me. The air smelled of pine and something old, maybe dust. Maybe freedom. There were no neighbors close by. No cameras. No curious eyes. Just me. And silence. But this silence was different from the kind in Silver Pines. This silence wasn't padded with pills and routine. This silence belonged to me. For the first few days, I didn't unpack much. I cooked simple meals. Saturday on the porch wrapped in an old quilt. Watched squirrels chase each other across the yard. Every night, I locked the door. Placed the lottery confirmation and trust papers into a fireproof box. And slid it beneath the floorboards in the hallway closet. Beside it, I left a handwritten note that said, "If you're reading this, something went wrong. But know this, I tried. I didn't vanish. I escaped." And just like that, I began the second act of my life. Not as someone's mother. Not as someone's patient. Not as someone's burden. But as Luna. Just Luna. The first week in the cabin passed like a dream. I cooked real meals. Scrambled eggs with cracked pepper. Chicken soup that didn't taste like salt water. I played old jazz records on a thrifted CD player Jack had mailed ahead of time. At night, I'd sit near the fire wrapped in that same quilt, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. I'd never felt so safe and so haunted at the same time. But peace has a way of cracking when you stare at it too long. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old documents I had taken from my home before Madison cleared it out, I found something that made my blood run cold. A loan agreement, not in my handwriting, but with my signature. Dated 8 years ago. Co-signed by my late husband, Daniel. I'd never seen it before, but there it was, his name. My name. A 6-figure loan attached to a business I barely remembered owning. I kept digging. Over the next 2 days, I pieced together something I'd never wanted to believe. Madison had been taking out loans in our names for years. After Daniel died, I thought the financial strain was from medical bills, bad investments. But it wasn't. It was her. Our daughter. The same child who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. She had forged documents, filed for loans against an old catering LLC. Daniel and I started back in the 80s. Even after he passed, some of them were still active, quiet, hidden beneath layers of automatic payments or hidden clauses. But one had gone into default just 3 months before she placed me in Silver Pines. That's when it hit me. She hadn't put me in that place to care for me. She'd done it to silence me, to get me out of the way while she siphoned what little was left. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I documented. I made copies of everything. Saved files on an encrypted USB drive Jack had given me. I scanned papers. Sorted them by date. Cross-referenced statements. Then I called Jack. I think she's been stealing from me for years. And from Daniel, too. I think this goes deeper than I imagined. He didn't say I'm sorry. He said, let's find out how far it goes. Together. We filed requests for archived financial records from banks, credit bureaus, and tax offices. Jack had access to legal databases. What we found was staggering. Madison had used Daniel's social security number years after his death to secure lines of credit. She had filed tax returns in my name, fraudulent ones with inflated deductions. Some had already been flagged by the IRS. But I had never known. She'd intercepted the mail. She'd rerouted communication. Slowly. Methodically. She'd built an empire on top of my silence. That night, I sat in the middle of the cabin floor. Papers spread out around me like a battlefield. I wasn't just betrayed. I was used. Manipulated. Targeted. By the one person I loved most. And now that I had disappeared, now that I had something she didn't expect a way out, financial power, distance, she would come looking. Not out of worry, but because she couldn't control what she couldn't see. So I made another decision. I prepared a backup file. Printed copies of every forged loan. Every signature. Every false return. I placed them into a manila folder and tucked it deep beneath the floorboards beside the trust documents. Then I wrote a second note. If anything happens to me, deliver this to the Department of Justice. I didn't feel fear as much as I felt focus. The kind of focus that comes when you realize you're no longer the hunted. You're the one with the map. And I was going to follow every step until the truth buried her lies. Because she hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen my trust. And I was going to take it back. The next morning, I woke with a clear head and a fire in my chest I hadn't felt in decades. Not anger, clarity. That bone-deep knowing that something had to change. And I was the one to change it. I walked out onto the cabin porch. Mug of coffee in hand. And for the first time, I felt the cold Montana air not as a threat, but as a baptism. Every inhale was crisp. Every exhale deliberate. I had work to do. With Jack's help, we built a timeline. Loan by loan. We traced how Madison had used my identity, my history, and my silence. She hadn't just used my name, she had weaponized it. For country club memberships, real estate down payments, even a car registered under my name I had never seen. Jack was cautious. He wanted to go to authorities immediately. But I wasn't ready. Not because I was afraid of Madison's reaction, but because I needed to reclaim something first, my voice. For years, I had let the people around me narrate my story. Nurses who spoke over me, doctors who prescribed without asking, my own daughter who made me feel like a burden instead of a mother. Now, I was going to speak for myself. So I began writing. At first, it was just notes, memories, names, dates. But it grew into something bigger, my full story. I wrote for hours every day in a leather-bound journal. I wrote the way I used to write recipes, carefully and with love. One day, Jack walked in and found me hunched over the table, ink on my fingers, pages scattered. He asked, "Are you writing a book?" I looked up and smiled. "No. I'm writing my testimony, because that's what it felt like. A record of truth? Not just for investigators or lawyers, but for me. So I could look back and remember that I fought, that I didn't go quietly. Weeks passed. Winter bled into spring. I planted a few herbs behind the cabin. I cooked more. I slept through the night. And then it happened. A letter, mailed to the post office box Jack had set up for me. The return address was Madison's. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No explanation. Just one line. "Please come back. I made a mistake." I stared at the words for a long time. There was no apology. No ownership. Just a demand disguised as remorse. She didn't miss me. She missed the control. I didn't respond. Instead, I mailed a copy of the notarized trust documents to my lawyer in Billings, ensuring the funds would remain inaccessible to Madison without my consent. Then, Jack and I filed the necessary reports with the Department of the Treasury and the FBI. I gave them everything: forged documents, false signatures, records of payments, even voice recordings from calls I had started documenting weeks ago. It was done. Not just legally, but emotionally. I had let go of the version of motherhood that required me to stay silent for the sake of peace. I had let go of the guilt that made me doubt my instincts. I had even let go of the fantasy that my daughter would suddenly become the woman I once hoped she'd be. I hadn't lost her. I had finally seen her for who she truly was. And now I was free to become who I truly was. Not a patient. Not a victim. Not a burden. But a woman who had weathered betrayal and come out stronger. As I sat by the fire that evening, journal in hand, I wrote the final line to my testimony. They tried to erase me, but I remembered who I was just in time. And I hope someone out there, maybe someone listening to this, remembers who they are too. Before it's too late, spring in Montana has a strange kind of quiet. It's not silence, it's space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to begin again. I remember the morning I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see someone broken anymore. The scars were still there. Sure, grief doesn't just walk away. But there was light in my eyes, a steadiness in my hands, a quiet kind of pride. My name is Luna, and I had come back to life. It started small. A meal shared with Jack's sister in town, who ran the local community center. A gentle invitation. "Would you be willing to talk to our women's group, Talk Me?" I nearly said no. But something in me said, if not now, when? So the next Thursday, I stood in a circle of folding chairs, surrounded by women of every age, some single moms, some widows, a few just lonely. And I told the truth. Not the polished version. The truth. How I let guilt control my choices. How silence nearly destroyed me. How betrayal doesn't always come with fists. It can come in paperwork. In forged names. In a daughter's cold voice on a birthday afternoon. And then I told them how I fought. There were tears. Laughter too. One woman stood up and said, "I thought I was the only one." That night, walking back to the truck, Jack turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just take your power back. You gave it away so others could find theirs too." It hit me hard. Because he was right. My story didn't belong to the people who hurt me anymore. It belonged to those who needed it. The following months were a whirlwind. A local journalist caught wind of my story through the community center. She asked if she could do a feature. I said yes, not to be seen, but to show others what survival looks like. The article went viral. Emails poured in. Letters from across the country. Women in nursing homes who had lost their legal rights. Sons and daughters who regretted pushing their parents away. Even a few social workers asking for advice on how to recognize financial abuse. It was overwhelming, but it was also healing. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Claire in Oregon. She had watched her sister's children manipulate their mother into signing over her home, her pension, even her wedding ring. Claire had tried to fight it but didn't know how. After reading my story, she said she finally felt like she wasn't crazy for caring. We spoke on the phone for over an hour. She cried. I cried. And in that moment, I knew this is what purpose feels like. So I did something bold. I launched a nonprofit. It's small, just me, Jack, and a few volunteers. But we help seniors understand their legal rights. We advocate. We hold workshops. We listen. And we name things plainly. Abuse is abuse, even when it comes dressed as family. I no longer live in fear of what Madison might say. She has her own journey to face. I wish her healing. But I no longer bend my life around her shadow. Instead, I sit in light now. The light of women who are waking up. The light of elders being heard. The light of truth that no longer needs to shout to be powerful. If you've made it this far, maybe you're wondering, why does this story matter? Because maybe you know someone like me. Or maybe you are me. Maybe you've stayed quiet too long. Let guilt make your choices. Let silence be your cage. But hear me, it is never too late to remember who you are. You're not invisible. You're not done. Your story isn't over just because someone else tried to write the ending. You can stand up. You can speak. You can start again. Just like I did. My name is Luna. And I came back to life. So can you. There's something strange about healing. It doesn't happen in a straight line. It loops. It stumbles. It tests you. Just when you think the past is behind you, it knocks again. Wearing a different face. That knock came for me on a Monday morning. I was sorting mail at the office for the nonprofit when I saw the return address San Bernardino, California. My breath hitched. Madison. The envelope was thin. 1 page. No return message, just a legal notice. She was contesting the reversal of the guardianship. Not to regain control of my estate, but to clear her name. She wanted it in writing that she hadn't intentionally exploited me. That word intentionally hung in my chest like smoke. I sat for a long time. Not angry. Not scared. Just tired. You see, when you rebuild your life from rubble, you learn to tell the difference between storms you must face and storms you simply walk around. I chose not to fight. I had already reclaimed everything that mattered: my voice, my freedom, my dignity. She could have the paper, but not my peace. Still, it stirred something in me. A question I had buried for years. Why did she do it? I'll probably never know. And that has to be okay. But the notice did something else. It reminded me that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's choosing grace when you could go for revenge. It's letting go. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak at a senior advocacy summit in Denver. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a social worker. But they wanted a survivor. A voice. I stood at that podium, palms shaking, and said the words I never thought I'd say out loud. My daughter took everything from me except my will to fight back. There was silence, then applause, and tears. After the session, a man in his 70s came up to me. He said he hadn't spoken to his son in 12 years. Ever since a financial dispute over his late wife's will, he told me, "You reminded me that silence is its own prison. I think it's time I make a phone call." That moment was worth every scar I carried. This is what I've learned. Sometimes the people who hurt you never say sorry. Sometimes the apology never comes. Sometimes the door you were waiting to be opened stays shut forever. But healing isn't about getting them to understand. It's about understanding yourself enough to move on. Today, I live in a small cabin just outside of Helena. Jack and I take long walks in the mornings. I bake pies on Sundays. I run workshops on elder law every other Thursday. The community calls me Miss Luna now. A woman who made it through the fire and decided to turn around to light the path for someone else. And I've written letters to myself. To the Luna who stayed silent for too long. To the Luna who felt forgotten in a nursing home. To the Luna who doubted whether she was still worth fighting for. I tell her, you were never weak. You were surviving. And now, you are soaring. So, if you're still listening, whoever you are, I hope you hear me now. No one gets to write your story but you. Not your children. Not a judge. Not the weight of shame. You get to decide what comes next. Stand up. Speak truth. Live free. Because it's never too late to come home to yourself.